Okay, cool. Well, we'll get started because we do have limited time. But yeah, thanks so much, everyone, for joining today. I'm your host, Kara Corbett. I'm the Partner Growth Manager at Suso Digital. We're an SEO firm that specializes in agency partnerships, meaning that we work with agencies of all sorts and sizes, including PR agencies, as their technical SEO delivery partner. So welcome to our webinar, Optimizing for AI Search, the PR Agency's Tactical Playbook. And this is the second webinar of 3 in our AI search series. So if you tuned into our first webinar, which was all about the AI search opportunity for PR agencies, it's really good to see you again. And of course, if this is your first webinar with us, we're really happy to have you joining us today. So today's session is really all about getting super tactical. We're going to really dig into all the ways that you can increase your clients' visibility in AI search engines beyond just doing earned media, traditional PR tactics. So especially as this relates to structuring your own content and also your technical optimization of your website. And to help me break this down, I'm joined by Josh Bliscoe, who leads AEO strategy. There's another acronym for you. It stands for Answer Engine Optimization. He also digs heavily into the research at Profound. So Josh is a top voice in AI search optimization, and I know he's going to provide a lot of color and data to today's conversation. So Josh, do you want to introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about Profound and what you do there on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Kara. Yeah, Profound is the first platform that enables marketers to understand, take action on, and tangibly improve their visibility in AI search. So what we do is we interrogate answer engines at the scale of millions of questions every single day to understand where brands appear, where products appear. We understand the influence layers, everything from what makes a URL, what makes a page actually get cited in answer engines and influence what the answer engine says across blog, affiliate, owned, social content. And my role specifically at Profound is head of AI strategy. So that means I'm really leading on the front end of what these actual strategies look like, how we can develop tangible, real tactics and strategies to influence how answer engines, AI search engines basically cite content, brands, and think about how we can build out visibility defensively in these new answer engines. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, lots of color you're going to provide for sure. So just so everyone knows, we will have a little bit of time for questions at the end of today's session. So feel free to pop them in that comments chat in the top right corner there. And then we'll be sure to try and get to everybody's at the end. So here's what we're going to cover today a little more deeply. First, we're going to discuss how large language models work at a very digestible level. Don't worry, we're not going to make it too technical, which is fundamental to understanding how to optimize for them. We'll look at where and how these tools get their answers, how each one differs, and then what that means for your client's visibility strategy. And then we'll move into our first tactical session, which is all about structuring content for discovery and how to package your own content in a way that AI systems can easily understand and extract for answers. And next, we'll cover the technical SEO and crawler accessibility, which might sound a little bit geeky, but it's absolutely crucial because if AI systems can't actually access your content due to blockers, then it will never have the chance to be found. And then finally, Josh is going to share real trends from Profound's proprietary data around what they're seeing is actually working to get their clients more brand mentions and citations in AI systems. So let's get into it. And first, let's start by setting the stage. Say it's 2019, you've just sent out a press release on the wire for your client, and it's getting picked up by relevant news outlets and then generating some interest from journalists. And if you optimize your press release with well-researched keywords, you might even have it show up in Google's organic search results. And whether that's one of the 10 blue links on the page or in that news carousel. Now, from an organic perspective, this was considered a success as you've achieved visibility not only from news pickups, but also on search engines. But in 2025 and beyond, organic success looks a little bit different. It's not just about getting stories written about your clients or taking up space on the Google results page. It's also about whether that story helps your client become a recognized and recommended brand by these engines. Increasingly, people are using tools like ChatGPT instead of Google. So our opportunity for organic visibility is really now lying in getting that story cited, which is when the LLM uses your brand as a source and links to it. So we can see an example there. Or if it uses their name in the answer. So we can see in that listicle style response, State Street Corporation is both mentioned and cited. Their press is mentioned. So really, their name is front and center at the exact moment of decision. And this is really the new gold standard for visibility in the AI age. And if you were at our last webinar, or maybe you're just really tuned in to the AI search discussion, you already know that earned media and other off-page trust signals are some of the most important pieces of AI search visibility, because these models are looking for authoritative and trustworthy sources for their answers. And that's really created a rebirth in demand for PR, because you guys have already been doing these things for years and years and years. But if you also tuned into our last webinar, you know that earned media and traditional PR tactics alone are not going to get your clients results in this domain. There's a whole other technical side to AI search where you can optimize your content and website in a way to help AI easily find, interpret, and include those answers. And the reality is most PR agencies lack this skill set. So the message today is simple. PR already has that storytelling side nailed down. The next step is mastering that technical layer, and that's exactly what we're going to walk through today. But first, let's talk a little bit about how these AI engines work, because of course, if we want to optimize for them, we have to understand their inner workings a little bit. LLMs don't work like Google. They don't index the web and spit back a ranked list of blue links for users to search through based on the keywords that they typed into the bar, and then find their answers, do their own research, and really come to their own conclusions. Instead, they provide you the answer. So it's no longer about where you're ranking in the pile. It's now whether or not you're actually part of that answer at all. And so if AI doesn't rank and it just gives answers, the obvious next question is, where does it actually get those answers from? And really, there's two main sources that we're concerned with here when it comes to optimization, which are training data and grounding data. So each of these models have their own training data sets that are sourced from things like the web, digitized books, articles, and public reports and documents. And unlike humans who continuously learn, or Google algorithms, which are constantly updated, LLMs have their knowledge effectively frozen at a specific point in time. So, ChatGPT's latest model, ChatGPT 5, their knowledge cutoff is as of October 1st, 2024. So it actually doesn't have any knowledge of anything beyond this point in its training data. So for instance, you can test it out yourself. If you ask the latest model, who's the president of the United States based on your knowledge, it will tell you Joe Biden. So with all this in mind, if your client's brand was already being covered, mentioned consistently, and part of the public conversation, chances are they were likely part of the training data. And if they weren't, you cannot just go back and add them later. That's why long-term PR presence really pays off. It really builds that awareness and background knowledge that AI models learn from in that training phase. And then that second main source is the grounding data, which is that live layer that some models use when they don't have all of the information. So for instance, if you ask ChatGPT that same question about who's the president of the United States, without that added context of based on your own knowledge, it'll actually send out these automated robots or crawlers to query the live web and then gather up-to-date sources to fact check and cite in order to ground that data. So this process is called retrieval augmented generation, RAG. I'm not going to say that again. It's a tongue twister, but this is really where we have the biggest influence when it comes to showing up in these engines, because if our client's content and website is set up in a way to aid these AI crawlers, they'll have an easier time seeing them and using them in their answers. So what exactly are these crawlers looking for when they decide what grounding sources to use for their answers? And we've really condensed this down into four main components, which are relevance, authority, context, and patterns. So relevance is about how well does your own content match the user's actual prompt. So think about it like, does it contain the right keywords or entities? So entities are things like specific names, places, or technical terms that signal to the AI that it's related to that topic. And now once it finds the stuff that's relevant, it then looks at authority and trust, essentially asking, can I rely on this source? Just like a journalist wouldn't rely on a random blog, AI also leans on trusted sources with factual information, proper authorship, and content that cites actual studies or official data. Now, for context, think of AI like a giant mind map. It's not just storing facts, but it's also storing the connections between entities and topics. It wants to know, does the brand and its content clearly connect to an industry or niche? So, for example, if your client makes medical devices, but their website and press only talks about awards or funding, but never about healthcare or patients or hospitals, to the AI, the brand might actually look like a finance or startup rather than a healthcare related brand. So that strong context makes sure that AI knows exactly where your client belongs in the bigger picture. And finally, patterns are about consistency, meaning Does your client's name, product description, or key messaging show up consistently across the web in many places? Because when this is done, AI starts to gain the confidence about the source, and it's likely to share that repeated narrative. So for PR agencies, this means your coverage and content, it's not just telling a story to people, it's also shaping the signals that AI systems use to fuel their answers. So Josh and I are going to talk about some of the ways that the main AI model is different from how they work, visualize information, and what sources they use, and which platforms are effectively best for your clients' needs. So ChatGPT, much more of a paraphraser. It's really good at pulling together a clean conversational answer out of multiple different sources, but unfortunately, it doesn't always show these sources. So that means your client's content could be in the response, but without their name or their website link attached to it. For its grounding data, it uses a hybrid index using SERP API. So it's often pulling from Google or Bing through that API. Now, Gemini powers both Google's AI mode and AI overviews. So AI overviews are those quick snapshot summaries at the top of traditional Google search results, and AI mode is that more conversational style model. And the good thing about Gemini is it actually uses Google's search index, which obviously they spent the better part of the last 2 decades perfecting with all of their algorithms. But it's also heavily interlaced with everything in the Google suite, like your search history, your Gmail, your location, your preferences. So I like to think it's the most personalized LLM. It's great for those localized searches if you're trying to find something local. And something interesting to note is that Google's AI mode uses this method called query fanout, where it essentially breaks down the prompt or query that you put in into multiple related subprompts or questions in the back end. And then it pulls answers for all of those questions from multiple different sources, and it essentially synthesizes it into one comprehensive answer. So that's why when you ask it one question, you get more than what you asked for, because it's already anticipating those next follow-up questions. And then Perplexity is by far the most transparent of all the 3 LLMs. It always shows its sources clearly, which I personally really like, because I like to fact check things myself, and just to make sure it's not hallucinating. They actually developed their own index, which is smaller than Google's, but one of their people said that they're focused on serving the most popular and high quality content from sources most likely to be relevant and trustworthy. So Josh, how about you talk to us a little bit about some of the citation data that you have seen for these and where you think that fits in?
Yeah, nothing is more evident right now in the differences between the infrastructure and underlying fundamentals of each of the answer engines than the top sources that they cite and the way that they cite those sources. So a great example right now is in ChatGPT. Not many people know this, but Wikipedia is actually the #1 cited domain in ChatGPT, period. And that sits at around 10% of all citations. That's massive. Wikipedia acts like a legitimacy layer within ChatGPT, legitimizing companies if they do have a Wikipedia page, and then not being able to find companies if they don't. It's a really interesting situation there. Reddit's also the #2 domain. Interesting thing about Reddit's seeing a bunch of shifts lately. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but very interesting there because obviously ChatGPT is going to be the most used answer engine, the most used pure answer engine there. On the Google side, very interesting. There's been a ton of different headlines about this. Google AI mode, Google AI overviews, both are very obsessed, some could say obsessed, with actually citing Google SERPs. So it's actually citing Google search results pages rather than citing any other page. And that kind of continues the trend of Google really trying to keep its own interface and its own infrastructure self-contained. The second most cited source in Google doesn't help either. It's YouTube. Google's actually able to read in YouTube transcripts and full YouTube data to power its AI search results, which is unique to it specifically. Lots of good YouTube citations there. And that's very interesting. And it's a very unique vector for brands thinking about their different social plays. Reddit's also obviously there in the Google models. It's the 3rd most cited source. And then for Perplexity, very interesting. Perplexity has a massive bend towards Reddit. So when we're looking at Reddit and Perplexity, it sits at around 6% of all citations. When we look at the second most cited source in Perplexity, which is YouTube, that's around 2%. So it's a 3x bend towards Reddit. Perplexity is very UGC driven. Perplexity has kind of always been about capturing the community idea. So if we're looking at running shoes, for instance, Perplexity is going to show you across, Reddit, across, Quora, across any different answer site where people are talking about running shoes, what the community is saying. And that's a unique advantage that they have right now.
Yeah. So yeah, the big takeaway is this: if you're going to do GEO or AEO or just AI search optimization, whatever acronym you want to call it, you got to know where your audience is and then optimize for that specific platform. But
Yeah.
Josh, you said there's some interesting changes happening pretty recently.
Yeah, Reddit has seen a pretty massive decline in its number of citations. And something that's not captured on this graph, but is still all the more relevant, is that Wikipedia has also been crunched as well. And so this is all happening at a time when in the traditional SEO world, we're actually seeing some pretty big changes from Google in terms of them deprecating some search parameters that usually allow people to search deep in the search results. So Google is changing its fundamental infrastructure. Literally, it did that on September 11th. You can see where that citation drop off occurs. We know ChatGPT's launched GPT-5, and they're also testing some new things with commerce. So they're changing how their RAG model works and how all those different things basically build out. So we've got plenty of volatility happening in this phase. The end result, which is hard to attribute to any one of those causes, is that Reddit's gone from being right around 12% of all citations to being right around 1% of all citations. The interesting thing there is that despite that decrease, Reddit is still the number two ranked cited source within ChatGPT. So it's not that Reddit's disappeared from influence, it's that the magnitude of that influence is just much more akin to its peers and closest competitors than it was previously. I mean, Reddit was just flying sky high before that, but very interesting trend to stay aware of. And it just shows us how much volatility exists in the space.
Yep. SEO people, they can never get away from volatility. There's always going to be algorithm changes and all that. So
that's true.
All right, Josh.
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing here right now is that if we think about the relationship, and this is some profound data here, if we think about the relationship between earned, owned, and social and competitor content, we can really start to see some of these groups kind of coalescing. So the biggest kind of content, the biggest group of content, period, in your AI search world is going to be the earned content, because this is where the models co-correlate and build consensus. Answer engines want to see the same narrative many times across the internet in different places. They want to see that a lot of different people say the same thing. But here's the thing. Your own content is your fortress. It is your fortress of solitude. It allows you to build out the accurate, clear, concise, detailed information about your brands, products, and services in a way that the answer engines will use as the source of truth and as the source of record, where the earned media is where you can go out and prospect. It's where you can go and pioneer, find new narratives, talk about new things, product launches, and understand how to build a cohesive narrative across both those things. So we make the facts happen on our own site. We can start building out the narrative, and then we disseminate that out across the earned media space, across social. It's really exciting to see this kind of makeup here. It's a lot of potential for brands.
All right. So let's get into why we're all here, which is to discuss the tactics. So this chart that we put together shows the main tactics that have been shown to influence visibility in AI search. And we've mapped them all by impact, time frame, and effort. So we're going to walk through these tactics in the next few slides, break down what they mean in practice. And then each tactic slide will also have a link to a useful resource or a statistic or research paper for further reading, which you can then view when we send out the PDF after the webinar. So the bigger point is this: we know PR agencies have, strong storytelling abilities, but most of the technical levers that you see here, like structured data, site hygiene, and server log monitoring, usually sit outside of the PR toolkit. So there's a little bit of a capability gap, but really our goal with this session is to make sure that you don't lose that ground, to show you how you can pair your strengths with these technical foundations and then really own the AI search opportunity. So let's start with content. And the golden rule of structuring content for AI visibility is really simple. It's make your content easy for AI to read, trust, and repeat. So if your content is messy, vague, or buried in jargon, AI is just going to skip it. And if it doesn't come from a credible source, AI won't trust it. And if it's not structured clearly, AI won't know how to use it. So what AI wants is clean, digestible building blocks that it can lift straight into an answer. So let's look at some practical tactics that you can start employing right away to make sure that your content is packaged in exactly that way. So when it comes to making your content easy for AI to pick up and reuse, here's some 3 simple things you can start doing right away. So first, use question style headings. AI is literally trained to answer questions. So if your headings mirror how people actually ask them, they're much more likely to be sourced in answers. So in PR, that could mean shifting a release headline from, brand launches a new fintech tool to how does brand's new platform help small businesses manage payments? And on the client side, it might mean titling your blog posts or your explainer pages with natural question-based headings like, what are the benefits of switching to solar energy in 2025? The next is breaking explanations into bullets and clear summaries. AI doesn't actually want to dig through dense paragraphs. It looks more for clear factual points that it can use to directly answer the query. And that's because AI doesn't actually work like Google. They don't read the full page when it's referencing sources. Instead, it's breaking content into passages or chunks that directly relate to the query. So if your content is formatted in a predictable and skimmable way, it helps the models access what they need more effectively, and you're more likely to be cited. And then third is adding FAQ sections, because AI is trained on natural human language, and we know that it's trying to answer questions. So Q&A snippets do a great job at mirroring this format, and they do specifically well on product pages and service pages. But I know Josh has some other things to add on this as well.
The interesting thing here is that answer engines, and this is a little tidbit here, they pull 80 to 100 characters of content from any given website. And so by actually building out the question answer format and concisely aligning that content to the things that people are directly asking and using bullets and summaries, what you're doing is you're allowing the answer engine in that 80 to 100 character snippet to extract the direct, self-contained, most meaningful part of that text that directly answers the user's question and give that back to the user. The answer engine can see, all right, here's the full page content. But what it needs to do is to be able to easily find the direct question that answers the user's question and then extract it. If you have long verbose paragraphs, if you have unstructured data, unstructured text, it's going to be much harder to do that. The answer engine can't just summarize the whole page all in one. So you want to provide a good landing pad for that answer engine to come onto that page and get what it needs to get in, get out, and then give the value to the user.
And AI models also favor fresh content because they're trained to prioritize sources that look current and actively maintained. And there's actually some hard data to back this up. Right here linked on this is a recent Ahrefs study that shows that on average, URLs cited by AI tools are about 25% fresher than those in traditional search results. So ChatGPT is most likely to cite newer pages, while Google's AI overviews, by contrast, are more comfortable citing older content, but freshness is still going to give you an edge. So the good news is, PR teams already work like newsrooms. They're fast, they're reactive, they're always tied to what's happening now. And that rhythm is exactly what AI rewards. So continue to publish timely updates. And, this is second nature, press releases, campaign launches, newsjacking. You're already putting clients into conversation as they happen. The extra step is just making sure that your clients mirror that cadence on their websites as well. So use their blog or their newsroom to post about product launches, industry awards, or timely opinion pieces. And you can also refresh older posts instead of letting old content go stale. For PRs, this can mean repitching or updating older thought leadership with new data points. And on the client side, it's about revisiting case studies and product pages or even evergreen blogs, and then adding context like as of April 2025, because these small updates keep content relevant in AI's eyes. And then make sure to highlight recent stats because data carries more weight when it's clearly dated. So you can strengthen coverage with phrasing like according to March 2025 survey, and you can update the client's research pages, blogs, or resources to show visible publication dates because, again, AI notices those time signals. And we already talked about FAQs, of course, because the models pull those answers verbatim from the sources that are easiest to parse, but you should also maintain them and keep them up to date as well. So that also means helping clients identify the questions people keep asking about their pricing, their leadership, sustainability, whatever is topical, and then ensuring the answers evolve with those questions on those service or product pages. Even the smallest edits will signal freshness to the AI models. Josh, what are you seeing in terms of fresh coverage?
Yeah, I mean, we've worked with hundreds of brands that have a great content catalog. And because of the way that answer engines access these pages, the actual lift is relatively low to get that content updated for 2025, refactoring that content. We've seen probably 3-4 dozen brands in the last 2 to 3 months who come to us and they say, hey, we want to get AEO optimized. I'm like, you're already 95% of the way there. It really is about freshness for you because you have so much excellent content. If it's not about updating the content for 2025, it's just about saying, hey, this content's already updated for 2025. Let's give those signals. Let's send those signals out to say, according to this 2025 study, putting 2025 in the title tag. Because another tidbit here on the technical side is that when that query fan out process that Kara was talking about happens, and the answer engines go out to the internet to look for results, one of the most interesting things that we're seeing, and this is vertical dependent, but between 10 and 30% of the time, answer engines like ChatGPT will add 2025 to the end of the query fan out. That seems benign, right? But the result here is that the actual pages that ChatGPT is looking for and pulls back, they're structurally biased towards having 2025 in the title tag, 2025 in the meta description, sometimes 2025 in the URL, the first 80 to 100 characters of the content. Basically, because of that 2025's inclusion in the actual query fan out, you want to be aligned and have 2025 in your content directly. So date alignment is just a structural way to increase your number of citations.
And when it comes to AI selecting their sources, surface level content is just not going to cut it as well. AI systems favor depth, credibility, and clarity. So here's 4 ways to make that happen. And the first thing is having topical breadth across your client's website. And this is also a really important thing in SEO, by the way, just traditional SEO, but you want to cover a good depth of content related to the industry, because we know that AI maps relationships between entities and overall topics, right? And they're using methods like query fan out, breaking those queries into multiple sub questions and intents. So in order to do this, we follow a hub and a spoke model for content. So you essentially have a hub page, provides a high-level overview that touches every core aspect of the topic. And then you have the spoke pages, which go into each of those core aspects in depth. And then, so if we put that into context here, let's say you have a fintech client that wants to put out a piece around the future of digital payments in 2025. This would be the hub page. And then some of the spoke pages could be about regulation and compliance, cross-border and global payments, security and fraud prevention, case studies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all of these would link back to the hub. And then if it made sense, some of the spokes could even link to one another. And all of this in-depth content will give the AI more signals and entry points for them to associate your brand with the topic and also answer more queries. You also want to use expert voices, of course, because AI looks at authority, like we talked about. So the same way a journalist does, a release that just says company launches new tool won't carry as much weight as one that features a quote from a CEO or a chief scientist explaining why it matters. So for a green energy client, that might be an engineer explaining the carbon savings in this example. And next, keep messaging consistent across editorial. If your client's product names and boilerplates or bios shift from one release to the next, it can actually confuse AI a little bit. But when the messaging is aligned across press releases and blogs and about pages, the system then gains confidence and it's far more likely to surface the story in that consistent narrative. And finally, including definitions and examples in your content. AI is trying to explain things back to the user, right? So if you introduce a technical phrase, make sure to define it in plain English. So an example that I have in front of me here is a vague line like regulation is a big challenge for fintech brands. That's not teaching the model much, right? But if you change that and you say, fintech regulation refers to the rules that govern digital services like payments and lending. For example, Europe's PSD2 law requires strong customer authentication for online payments. Now you've actually given AI 2 things that it can cite. 1, a definition, and then also 2, a real world illustration. So definitions make your content more retrievable for those like what is or what are questions, and examples give real examples for those give me an example questions. And together, those are dramatically increasing your chances of being cited in an AI generated answer. So the takeaway here is really, really simple. Comprehensive content doesn't mean long-winded. It means covering the context, showcasing authority, and explaining it clearly. And then, of course, keeping the message consistent, because that's the kind of content that AI trusts and reuses. And now, even as AI reshapes search, EEAT, which stands for expertise, experience, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, this still matters. So for those of you that don't know, EEAT was a key framework in the SEO industry, still is, that Google actually had human reviewers use to assess the quality and credibility of online content. So they would go through the website and they would manually look at pages and they would assess EEAT signals. And the difference now is that it's not just humans reviewing these signals. AI is also considering who's speaking and why they're credible and whether their story is backed up. So with this in mind, you should do the following. The first thing is adding expert bylines and bios. And for PRs, of course, this is already in your wheelhouse. You're placing your clients in op-eds and interviews and thought leadership. But you can take it further by making sure every piece has a clear byline and also a short bio that highlights their credibility. So this also applies to your clients' own blogs or resources on their site. Articles should have a real author, not just an admin. I've seen that quite a bit. Guilty. And ideally, the byline links to an actual bio page for that author. And then on that bio page, include information that shows that they're a credible and real source to be talking about this topic. So, include a professional headshot, information about relevant credentials, publications, and experience, and then link out to their social medias as well and any other credible content. And you should also ensure that your clients have strong about pages on their website so that you can help them tell their story in a way that's consistent and transparent. You essentially want to help the AI understand who's behind the brand and what they do and what they stand for, because this makes it easier for LLMs to associate your brand with those topical clusters we spoke about earlier. And ideally, this page highlights the company background, the history, the team, the mission. The location is important as well. And then any other trust signals like awards and accreditations and certifications. And we know PRs are already highly skilled at highlighting these credibility markers and pitches and coverage. So we just need to make it known on the website as well that the brand is recognized and respected. And then finally, citing external resources and references. So PR people can strengthen coverage and press releases by weaving in credible third-party validation, citing industry benchmarks, referencing academic studies. It's kind of like we're going back to university and, citing our sources, linking to independent reports. But we should also be doing the same on client websites. If they publish a stat or make a bold claim, you should ideally link out to the original source, because this transparency builds trust, and then both people and AI are picking up on these signals, right? So takeaway here, simple again, you're already doing a lot of things to build authority. The opportunity is just making sure that those signals aren't just in the press, but also baked into the client's own website where AI can actually read them and reuse them. Now, one of the questions I'm asked all the time by our PR agency partners is how to format a press release to enhance AI visibility. And in addition to the other tactics that we've already covered and we're going to continue covering today, there are 3 more that are especially important for this. And we've attached a great resource to this slide from Notified that gives a great template for you to use to make your press releases more visible to AI. So first, front load your key details, because AI systems grab the most important facts from the very start. So if the who, what, where, when, how, why are buried in that 4th paragraph, there's a good chance that they're going to be missed. Put all the essentials right at the top so that journalists and AI have the context. And the good news is this is a standard practice. I don't think anyone is writing press releases in another way, but so nothing's changed too much so far here. Second, using conversational phrasing. So press releases, they can't just tell anymore. They also need to answer. And AI thrives on natural question-driven content. So instead of writing in statement form like we typically do with press releases, build in the questions that people will actually ask in an FAQ format. So, when is it launching? What problem does it solve? And then answer those directly in the copy. And then third, optimize multimedia with context. So a press release often comes with images, sometimes videos and infographics, but AI can actually only reuse them if it's properly labeled. So adding things like alt text, captions, and clear file names that describe exactly what's happening will give the model even more entry points to understanding the story. Now, the hard truth about AI search is this, and we've kind of alluded to this, but if the AI robots can't reach your content in that grounding phase, you may as well not exist or have control over your narrative. It doesn't matter how good the story or the content is or how much coverage you've secured. If the technical foundations aren't in place on your own content, AI tools won't see it and they won't use it. So for PR agencies, this is often the hidden gap. You can land the headline in the perfect outlet or create impactful, thought leadership pieces. But if it's locked behind a paywall, if it's published as a PDF, or if it's buried on a slow, clunky site, AI will just skip it. And so that's why pairing storytelling with technical SEO is really important here, because the story gets you noticed, but the technical setup ensures that AI can actually pick it up. So if AI systems can't reach your content quickly and clearly, they won't use it in their answer. And that's why the basics of site accessibility matter more than ever. So the following tactics, they might sound pretty technical without any developer background, but don't worry, I'm going to try and make them as digestible as possible. So the first thing is we want to ensure that our client sites have crawlable sitemaps. So a sitemap is essentially a file hosted at the root domain of your website. So, website.com/ you'd have sitemap.xml. And it's basically a roadmap of all of the important pages on a website to help the machines find your fresh content quickly. So if your client regularly publishes releases or thought leadership, a sitemap ensures that those updates are visible and not left behind. We also want to ensure that the website has a clean site architecture. So this means keeping your navigation and your URL structures very logical and simple. Journalists, users, and AI crawlers should be able to find your newsroom, your about page, and your product pages in just a few clicks. And this also extends to how pages are labeled. So using clear URL slugs, making sure every page has a descriptive meta title and meta description. Josh is going to talk about this a little later as well, giving you some more definitive advice here. But and then another thing is your site speed is also critically important here, because slow pages just straight up get ignored because AI will move on to faster alternatives. So there's things you can do in the back end to help speed up your site, such as optimizing images, caching. Sometimes it's a server problem. And then, you can actually you can do this right now. You can take a client's website of yours and you can put it into a tool called Page Speed Insights. It's literally pagespeedinsights.com, I'm pretty sure. And then see how they're scoring and identify some of the assets on their website that's causing the website to be slow. So both on mobile and on desktop. And we touched on how AI is mapping relationships between entities and topics, and that you need to cover a good topical depth on your site. And I also mentioned that you want to link those spoke content pieces to the hub pieces. And this is a process called internal linking. So it shows AI the relationship between those key pages. And so when you link your fintech digital payments page to a related page like fraud prevention or cross-border transactions, you're teaching the AI that they belong to the same story under the same brand related to this main topic. All right, Josh, talk about visibility blockers.
Yeah, there are a few. It's quite interesting. So the first thing that I really want to talk about is JavaScript. JavaScript is like the gotcha for so many big websites right now. So even to this day, across Claude, across ChatGPT, across Gemini, across Perplexity, none of the answer engines that I just mentioned can see and render JavaScript. So if you've got a beautiful page with great content, but it's rendered client-side, it's rendered through JavaScript, the answer engine sees a blank white page. It doesn't see anything. It basically isn't going to be able to get that context. So making sure that our content is server-side rendered, but that basically means is making sure it's in the HTML, making sure the content is in the HTML and it's already there for the answer engine to see is the first big step towards getting our content pulled out. The second thing is PDF only publishing and reporting. So answer engines don't typically download files. So if you're going onto a web page and you have this incredible research report or this incredible white paper, but it's in a PDF format and it has to be downloaded, or you have to put your contact information in, that's not going to be digestible. And even the PDF URL itself, really Perplexity is the best at this, but it's still kind of spotty. It's not always something that's going to be easily indexed and easily understood where and how it should be contextualized based on the way that the PDF is going to be read in. So PDFs are pretty dicey right now. Hard paywalls, obviously there's a little bit of litigation going on there with OpenAI, Perplexity, New York Times, all those different companies are trying to figure out what paywalls mean in the first place. But basically here to say that paywalls are imperfect. They're not a good idea if you want your content to get picked up and understood through. Basically, there is a debate that answer engines can see through paywalls, but we don't want to rely on that for visibility. We want to keep our ungated content that answer engines are supposed to see ungated, and our gated content should be gated. So right now it's a soft gate, but paywalls are kind of a gate. And the biggest one of them all, I think, right now is robots.txt. Robots.txt is like it is like the Great Wall of China for these answer engines. If you're blocking the answer engines in robots.txt, they're not going to be able to get in. And I've worked with companies where they've bought Profound, they're ready to get started. And we go and we look at the data and they're getting 0% citations. Well, we ask the web dev team, we look at the robots.txt. Oh, it looks like they're literally blocking OpenAI. It's a really easy fix. Hey guys, we really want to have OpenAI cite our pages and look at our pages. So going in there, checking your robots.txt, making sure it's not blocked, really important. And there's even now CDN providers like Cloudflare who are actually in your own Cloudflare instance. You might see Cloudflare blocks bots sometimes by standard. So this is something to go in and check. Make sure you're not doing that as well if you want those citations.
Very valuable advice. And if you want AI to understand your content, you're going to need to label it clearly. And that's exactly what structured data or schema markup does. It's essentially a little piece of code that you put on the back end of the website on your content that tells the AI what the content is. So here's the interesting bit. Even Google has come out and said that structured data plays a role in AI overviews. Their own guidance highlights that markup helps their systems interpret content, and they've specifically advised that structured data should match what's visible on the page. So the takeaway is, if Google is mentioning this in the context of AI overviews, you can bet that they're at least looking at structured data as part of the signals for visibility. So let's look at some of the most practical schema examples for this in PR. And by far, the most important one that you guys can start implementing is news article schema. Because when you mark up a press release or news coverage with this schema, you're telling AI systems exactly what the coverage is. So whether that's an announcement, you're telling them who wrote it, when it was published, and then who it's about. So that makes it far more likely to surface when people ask questions about your client or the news. And then how-to schema is really great for those step-by-step explainers and guides, like how to integrate our technology with QuickBooks or something like that. FAQ schema helps up mark those common questions and FAQ content that we talked about earlier. And then video schema makes sure that branded videos, they're not just sitting on your website. They can also show up in AI generated answers, because we know that some of the LLMs are actually multimodal, meaning that they can answer responses with video content. They're learning from different types of content as well. So if you want to check if your clients have schema markup on their site or on their service pages or product pages or whatever, you go to schema.org, and then you can see examples of all of the different kinds of schema markups that you can put on your content. There's literally hundreds of them. And then you can even check or validate on this. Put your client's website in and then see if they've got any types of these schema markups implemented. Okay, we started this session with this graph, and I just want to bring it back to end on the full picture, because by now you've seen how the different tactics break down, the content side where PR teams already have quite a bit of strength, and then the technical side where that capability gap typically is. And you can see that actually many of these technical items are done pretty quickly within the first 2 months of the campaign, which is great. Sometimes it's just a small change like that robots.txt that we talked about that will really start to skyrocket your visibility. So if PR teams can bridge this gap, whether that's by building this knowledge internally or collaborating with a technical partner like Profound or SUSO, you don't just protect your relevance in the AI era, you're leading it, right? So Josh is going to take us through some very specific trends from Profound's data that he's been seeing and talked about, I think, recently at Brighton SEO and all that. So
it's been a pleasure there. Yeah, so we're looking right now, this data set right now is showing us that listicles and comparative content are dominating in AI citations. This is a sample of over 2.6 billion with a B citations. So we took our entire citation catalog and we annotated it. We looked at every single citation and we figured out that comparative listicle content right now is the single most common cited type of content. And it makes sense why. When answer engines are going out to the open internet, they're again relying on that structured information, direct comparisons, cohesive, factual, and authoritative takes on the top products, brands, or services in any given industry. And the formatting and style of comparative listicle content tends to synergize most easily and most effectively with the kind of content that answer engines are capable of bringing back to the user and the kind of questions that users are asking. So that's a 25.37% distribution towards comparative content, a 12% distribution towards blog. So that's a 2x bend right now towards that piece of content. I do think this is going to change in the long run, but I think right now, because most people aren't thinking about releasing content in this easily digestible AEO format, there is this natural bias towards comparative content. Yeah. And the second piece right now, this was really interesting for us to find. Semantic URLs get 11.4% more citations on average. So what that basically means is semantic URL. That basically means that URLs with natural language queries, like if I'm writing a page about the best CRMs, a semantic URL for a best CRMs page would be the-best-2025-CRMs-compared. That's a semantic URL. They earn 11.4% more citations than a normal URL like 83gf2/CRMs/list. Reason for that being that answer engines are going to their list of results. We know that SERP API, for instance, is what ChatGPT is using. SERP API sends a list of results. ChatGPT looks through the list and is like, which of these pieces of content is most likely to give me the answer to what the best CRM is? What piece of content is going to tell me that information? And it sees the best CRMs 2025 compared. It's like, oh, that's pretty good. That gives me some confidence. And then it sees 8GF2104 CRM list. And it's like, I don't know about that. 11.4% more citations there. Very interesting. And that's just a free 11.4% citation gain for anyone who wants to implement. Yeah, social media and UGC are also very interesting. I used to say that social media and UGC were like basically bar none, they're everywhere, but Microsoft Copilot had to go and stop indexing Reddit, so I had to change it to situationally. So 17.4% of all ChatGPT citations are for UGC. So we're talking about Reddit, we're talking about LinkedIn, Quora, Yelp, TripAdvisor, Instagram's even in there a little bit. Perplexity's 15.8%. Google AI Overviews is 12%. Microsoft Copilot doesn't cite Reddit, doesn't cite YouTube, so it's at 4.6%. Very interesting there. But the thing to take away here is that this is no longer just an SEO thing. This is no longer, one channel, on website URLs talking about, some of the same units that we're playing with. This is expanded in scope. Search teams and just, marketing teams in general have to start talking to each other, because social is a new landscape in product and brand discoverability, especially with these answer engines. So it's very interesting to see how prevalent this is.
Awesome. Thanks so much for all of your insights, Josh. I do want to just take a couple minutes just before Q&A to share a great way to dip your toes into AI search and GEO without any investment. And that's with our Partner Club, which is a completely free resource that gives agencies and consultants access to a few main things. So we give free private workshops to upskill our partners on SEO and AI search. So it's very similar to today's webinar. So if you like the content, you want to spread that love with the rest of your agency, you join the Partner Club and then you just coordinate a workshop with me and I can give that free training to your wider team. We also have a 24/7 help desk that connects you directly with our SEO specialists. So you can get answers to your questions about AI search and SEO within 24 hours without any investment. And then we also do free SEO and AI visibility reports for our partners, white labeled in their branding, and they really give a good snapshot into how their clients are showing up on traditional and AI search engines. They're not automated. We have actual people on our team that put about 2 hours of analysis on the website, and they look at competitors and they identify things on the actual website that might be holding their performance back, whether that's like technical things like structured data or the lack of on page, whether that's the way the content is structured, or even if, maybe technical and on-site issues, off-site issues we mentioned, right? So there's, you can see some pretty cool logos here. These are just some of the over 1,500 agencies that are part of the Partner Club. They use these free resources to get upskilled. We've worked with some agencies on actual paid SEO projects as well as their back-end technical delivery partner. So very easy way for you to fill that technical gap. Just sign up on the website using that link there, but we'll also have a QR code at the end of the presentation for this as well. And just a teaser for our final session in this series, which is going to tackle the big question that always comes after strategy, which is how do you measure success in AI search? AI search is becoming a core part of how people discover brands. So rankings alone aren't really enough, and we need new ways to track and report on visibility. So in the next webinar, I'll be joined by Chris Andrew from Scrunch AI, where we'll dig into exactly that, what kinds of KPIs we should be looking at in this new era, how to actually monitor brand presence in generative answers, and even how to track traffic and conversions on your site from AI using Google Analytics and more. It's actually a lot easier than you think. So join us on Thursday, October 30th for AI visibility you can measure, AI search reporting for marketers. The QR code to sign up for this will also be at the end of the presentation as well. So we'll head into some Q&A, and I'll put all those QR codes on the screen. You can check out Profound there. You can join our Partner Club, and you can also sign up for our webinar there. So I see one question so far. I've got my colleague Deep is managing it in a separate tab for me. But Nick Herf has asked, do hard paywalls also include gated owned content on website for the purpose of driving leads? How can you drive leads through content without gating it? Great question. So yes, they're still going to treat them the same way as they would with like gated press, right? So what you can do is you can create dedicated landing pages for that gated content. And you want to almost spoil a little bit of that content in like a key takeaways section on that landing page. Unfortunately, I know you want to protect that, but that is unfortunately like the workaround. Josh, do you have anything to add there?
I think that's an excellent answer. I think the only thing that people are doing that's kind of crazy right now, there's a crazy strategy where people are basically serving answer engine user agents different versions of the page than your Google bot or other agents. That's called cloaking, and it's kind of a gray area in SEO. But it's an interesting test because people will see this and they'll say, I really want to have this piece of content. If ChatGPT was to go to this landing page, maybe I want a markdown version of the page to load or some sort of scrapped down version of the page that has a little more context into what's going on the page. It's worth a test. It's really interesting. The results so far, not too earth shattering, which is like good, I think, honestly. It means that we don't have to change our websites too much. But the interesting thing is that the answer engine on average was able to pull just a little bit more content through in the test that we were doing. I don't think it's going to change the world, but if you're absolutely dead set on getting a certain white paper or something like that digested by an answer engine, there are ways that you can do it.
And Josh, like, what's your opinion on, because it does very much feel like we're in sort of that like black hat era of AEO. Do you think that like things like that, like cloaking, are going to eventually sort of be deprioritized?
I think cloaking is going to get legitimized, if anything. I think there's going to be real frameworks for actually giving answer engines a slightly, I guess, wordier or contextual or uglier. You can define whatever it is, but answer engines, it should be a two-tiered system, I think, where on the bottom system, answer engines get like this text version of every web page, and they can just go through and get them MVP. They get all the details, all the text that you need. And the human version of the web page should be beautiful, gorgeous. It does not need to be optimized for machine readability. And right now we're in this situation where basically each of those different answer engines and each of the search engines are using the same system and the same kind of units to browse and understand what's going on. Where we really want is the ability and the freedom to kind of unshackle both of those systems. So for now, we're in this awkward state. I think we're actually going to get to a more peaceful, harmonious state where the answer engines have the ability to access content that's made just for them. Especially as commerce starts to get important.
Yeah.
Especially with commerce.
Yeah. That more agent to agent experience. Yeah. Okay, Lorraine says, can you explain briefly what schema is? Yeah, so it's essentially a piece of code. It's a developer-looking piece of code that you put on the back end of your website or content. I can show you an example of what it looks like. This is what it looks like, essentially. It's not, seen to the naked eye. You'd have to actually go inspect the code and you'd be able to see it. But like I said, you can go to schema.org. I can pull it up right now quickly. And then you can see all of the different kinds of schemas here. You can even search. So for example, I talked about news. There's news article, there's news media organization, newspaper, all of these different schemas. And they'll tell you essentially how are you going to code that into it. And then you'd put that into the back end of the website. I'm not a developer. I've never done it. So ask your local web developer, or like I said, consult with some technical experts like our team or Josh's team as well. Kimberly asks, how can you build out a media list that is ranked for AI search visibility? The great question. So I have some insight onto this. I don't know if Josh also has some additional insight on this, but there are specific publications that have tied deals and made partnerships with some specific tools. I'm happy to share that in a follow-up email as well. Lily Ray actually put together a really comprehensive one that says exactly what Perplexity's deal with this publication is and how they're providing information for their search answers. Actually, let me pull it up now and I'll drop it in the chat so we all have it, because I do think it's a really valuable partner. Closed my Slack here. I got to pull it up. But in the meantime, Josh, do you want to add some color while I look for that?
Yeah, I think that one of the most interesting things is that you have to see what's being cited to a certain extent to understand where the arbitrage opportunities are with some of these citations. Like what we've seen right now, because utility first content is such a mandate. When I say utility first content, I literally mean like content that gives answer engines the direct answer from any source, because some of these traditional SEO strategies matter a little less in AEO. What we're seeing is that those sources are very vertical dependent. I would talk to people in the PR industry, in the ad industry, who I show them, here's the, for your client, I'm going to throw a company. I'm just going to say, for your client, Burger King, these are the top cited sources in fast food. And they'll be like, okay, what's weird is that, Fortune, Business Insider, Forbes, all of the, Bon Appetit, none of those are at the top list. The ones at the top list are like eatthis.com and like fastfoodeats.com and like davesburgerblog.com. So it's really interesting to see, as you start to dive into hyper verticalization, the actual media list gives you innate opportunities to arbitrage and hit sites that have much less traditional visibility, but because their content is so specifically geared towards the industry and the answer engines don't really read into their authority that much, or they do, but they don't, not as much as traditional SEO, you have an opportunity to start playing in those specific fields and in specific places. It's really interesting.
Cool. Yeah, I just shared the link to the document that was put together by Lily Ray, who's like an esteemed SEO voice.
Yes.
And so there's a whole list that you can see here. The link to the publisher, who the AI company that they have that partnership with, and then key details of that partnership. So definitely, as like a little strategy, would probably recommend prioritizing some of these publications if you're doing some pitches and things like that. Go back to my presentation. And then Tom says, does paid for content like advertisements or advertorials drive citations as well as editorial if it's on a trusted source, or can LLM see that it's paid, so therefore lacks credibility? I can speak to a specific stat done by Muckrack that pretty much showed that paid sources aren't contributing to LLM visibility at all. But Josh, what are you seeing on your end?
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah. So easy answer. Paid for content is not gonna get you as much AI visibility. That question will come into, it might change, right? Because ChatGPT is inevitably going to start including ads in their thing. So stay tuned on advancements there. I believe that's all the questions. We've got about 3 minutes left. So if there's any final questions, drop them in the chat. And then otherwise, our help desk is open. Josh's email is in the presentation, so we'll share that over. Definitely follow Josh on LinkedIn. He's always sharing like the latest news and research from Profound. And join our partner club because it's free. Why not? I'll give everyone just a couple more minutes, and then I'll give everyone their day back. Last questions? No? All right. Well, thanks so much for joining once again, Josh. It was great to see you again. Josh and I did a talk in New York at Tech Week together. Is always good riffing off each other. Stay tuned for our next webinar. Definitely sign up for that, and hope to see you all there. Enjoy the rest of your week. And yes, you'll get the slides. We'll send that over in an automated email. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye. Take care.